Hey, welcome back to Gold Scratch. So today, this is a follow-up. This is Tony Guzzo's 302. Got some things to tell you about it. I made previous videos. One of them is about what camshaft do we pick? And lots of great responses out there from guys that know more about camshafts than I do. And we've been kind of absorb all that information and put it together in an organized way to make the right decision. So today I'm going to show you a tool that I use, I guess going back to my corporate days, when you have to make a very complex decision, when there are many, many variables involved. Every big decision is a bunch of little decisions. Every big problem is a bunch of little problems. So a way to break that down, that big problem or big decision, into a bunch of little ones, analyze them individually, score them, rank them, and come up with a number that is basically as objective as you can get to make the best choice. So I have a process. We're going to use Mike will put a screenshot in the video so you can take your time looking at it, but I'm going to use it as a guide to go through. So it's also a follow-up on the subject of planning. And if you've heard me say before, plan, plan, plan. If you watched recent video we made with Bill Little, which is doing great. People love Bill Little. And what is his first comment that he made in the video is you have to have a plan. Make sure you have a plan. So the great thing about planning is if you make a mistake in planning, you can just rub it out or a click of a mouse or whatever and fix it. If you make a mistake, if you don't plan and you make a mistake in your decision making and you buy parts that don't fit or don't work or you make mistakes that way, it's expensive to fix. So take time to do that. So I'm going to get to how we decide on the camshaft using some formulas. But to start off with, for every project, I have separate videos on the subject of planning. Let's just give me a little refresher. First, you have to have the first part of your plan. You have to have a project definition. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then you try to achieve the desired outcome to that. So let me give you an example. Example could be, I want to build a small block Chev engine that'll run on pump gas. It'll be a daily driver, but it'll push my 3,400 pound car to 12 seconds in a quarter mile. That's the project definition. So everything you do in your project should align with that definition. If it violates it, then you shouldn't be doing it. So the next thing is, I mentioned this before, if you can't sit down with a pencil and paper, or I use a computer, you can do a pencil and paper and write down, let's say you're going to take the engine out of your car and rebuild it. First step is you take the hood off. The last step is you put the hood back on and drive it away. If you can't define every step you're going to take in that process of removing the engine, tearing it down, repairing it or modifying it or rebuilding it, installing it, tuning it, testing it, if you can't put every line item, and in each line item you define the parts you're going to need, the services you're going to need, how much they're going to cost, how long it's going to take, and add all that up to get a total cost, you're not ready to start your project. And you shouldn't start it, because over the years I've seen many, many projects. Guys start and they buy a bunch of parts. They don't think it through. They get halfway through, either run out of money or get disillusioned and realize they shouldn't have started in the first place. And they sell it off as a discount to some lucky buyer who finishes it and gets the benefit of it. Don't be that guy or girl. Think it through, have a plan. And so part of the planning is, big part of it is decision making. You have to make a lot of decisions along the way. So in Tony's case, Tony wants to restore his 302 Z28 Camaro engine to be as original as possible, make more power, run on pump gas, run 7,000 RPM, and perform well as a daily driver as well. So that's his project definition. So when you get to that, then you got a whole bunch of factors, and you have to separate what I call the musts versus the wants. So it must be a solid lifter camshaft, because The Z28 Camaro was a solid lifter camshaft, so that's a must for Tony. It must go 7,000 RPM. That's a must for Tony, or have an operating range to go 7,000 RPM. 302s are small motors. They have a short crankshaft. They don't make a lot of torque, but they make horsepower if you rev them up to 7,000 RPM or in that area. So that's a must. Then there's a whole bunch of wants. So there's a whole bunch of things you have to consider. And I'll refer to my little chart here. One is the power and torque that it's going to make. Of course, that's important to them. Originality. Tony wants it to be as original as possible. For example, he's got the little special rocker arms with the O stamp on them. He'd like to use those. He wants to keep it as original as he can. The original Z28 came with a solid lifter, flat tappet camshaft. So then the sound is one of the other factors. Sound quality. He wants it to sound exactly the way it would have sounded in 1968 with the original camshaft. Drivability. He's going to drive it. Now, one thing that makes it easier for us in doing this, he's got a 456 gear in his 68 Camaro. So Z28 302s don't make a lot of torque, but a 456 is a great torque multiplier. I've made videos on gear ratio selection before, and that's a great gear for 302. Unless you're going to do a long distance driving, they wouldn't be very happy with it because you got to go lots of RPM. But it's a great driver on the street, especially when you have a 2.2 first gear. So that's important. Idle quality and vacuum. I put those two things together. If you have a power brake, for example, you need to be able to make enough vacuum to make it work. And just to give you my own Z28 when it was new, if the idle speed got down too low, the power brake didn't work. That's how radical the original stock cam was. So that's a consideration. Idle quality and vacuum kind of go together. Risk. There's a risk involved in building any engine. As I mentioned before, you got to get everything right. It's not like, if a goalie stops 9 out of 10 shots, he's got a pretty good save percentage. There's 16 valves in your engine, 8 pistons, multiple of everything else. And if you get 15 out of 16 right and you don't get the 16th, you're going to have a failure. So if you're a goalie, you can't let any goals in, right? So risk is a big factor. Installing a solid lifter cam is a big issue. I've had pretty good success. It's come up in previous comments. Somewhere around 25 engines in the last 5 years with solid lifter cams that have come out of here on the test stand and on the dyno with 0 failures so far. But I still hold my breath for the first 10 minutes when I start one up because you never know when it's going to be the next one. So risk is a factor. Difficulty of installation, modifications required. So if you install the original cam, obviously it's not difficult. You don't have to modify anything. One of the selections is a roller cam. Then we got the valve pockets in the small block Chev head aren't big enough for valve springs. For the valve spring pockets, aren't big enough for the valve springs that are going to support a roller cam. So you got to modify the heads. Then you need shorter push rods. Then you need a whole bunch of other things. You probably can't use your rocker arms. You probably got to use roller rocker arms because it also has more lift than those rocker arms can take. So there's a whole bunch of factors. So the process is breaking those factors down. And the next thing is weighting them. Some things are more important than others. And so you have to weight them. And then you score each possible selection based on that. Now, I've just made an example on my own without any consultation with the other guys. Ideally, what I like to have is sitting around the table with Alex and Bill Little, Tony, Mike Kimball, and myself. And each of these items, we get a consensus about how much each item is worth and how items are scored. But I've just gone ahead and scored the original choices. Now, thank you very much for all the guys that give us input into cam selection. They're all good. One of the things, most of the suggestions were based on making the most power. That is important, but it's not the only thing that we have to consider, and that's why we have to take that into consideration. So one of the issues which we're going to do is flow the heads. Bill's going to just come back on vacation. We're going to have him flow the cylinder heads. and probably port them to give us flow. And then the camshaft selection, if you want to pick the one that makes most power, has to be compatible with the kind of flow you're going to get out of your cylinder head. So we have to figure that out too. Let's look up, if Ali can come a little closer, and Mike's going to put a screenshot. So this is my selection process. So first of all, I've listed the musts. So it must be solid lifter cam. It must have a 7,000 RPM operating range. I've already described that better. So the wants are maximize available power, replace the original sound, drivability, idle quality, vacuum, originality, and once again, Tony wants to use his original rocker arms. So those are things we've listed. So when we look at the possible choices, if it doesn't meet the must, we don't even score it. So everything that's here is scored. So I've got the camshafts selection in this column. This one is the Howard's roller cam. This was Bill's suggestion to go to a roller cam. This cam is a Summit knockoff of it. It's not exactly the same cam, but it's made by Summit to sound like it. The third choice is the exact, made by Comp. It's the exact original GM Duntov 3030 cam, for example, with the exact specifications. And the bottom one is the one that Tony selected. It's a Comp 12-673-4, and we'll get into the details of it. So in the case of the pattern, the type of the cam, solid lifter, and all the rest are solid flat tappets, because no hydraulics here because it doesn't meet the must, right? Then the pattern, they're all single pattern except the one that Tony picked is a dual pattern camshaft. Advertised duration, so Bill's advertised duration is less because it's a roller. Rollers have faster acceleration on the ramps. For the same amount of lift or even more lift, you can get away with less duration, advertised and at 50. So the Summit cam is 314 degrees. The Chevy cam, the Duntov 3030 exact replica, 346 degrees. It had very, very soft ramps, but lots of duration, and until the valves close, you're not sealing anything. And that's the one that Tony picked, 281, 284, 291. Then the duration at 50, the roller is 237. The Summit's is 254, and so is the GM cam. And the one that Tony picked is 240. This is the Comp cam, 247. Bill's has the most lift. These two are exactly what the lift on the original cam is actually 485, and they call it 3030 because they had 30 thou lash. So you take that 30 thou away, and it's 455. And the one that Tony picked, the Comp cam, is 504, 498. LSA, there's your LSA numbers, and there's just watch. David Vizard just made a new video last night on LSA. You should watch it. Controversial issue, which affects a whole bunch of things, but overlap is the end result. The amount of overlap you end up having is a function of two things, the duration and the LSA. If your duration gets more, your overlap's going to get more. If the LSA gets less, your overlap's going to get more. If the LSA gets more, your overlap's going to get less. So here's the numbers that we have. There's a range. I think 50 to 75 is considered good for a hot street car. According to David Vizard, I have his chart here. Once again, I'm not going to plagiarize it. So those are the cams that we have. Now, other choices were selected or suggested. I'm just using this mainly, not even to finally pick the cam because I'm doing it on my own, but to show you the process. So the next thing we do, here's the factors: power and torque, originality, sound, drivability, idle quality and vacuum, risk, and difficulty of installation. So I've weighted them. They're not all equal, and it's a little bit of subjectivity. We want to make power. So the biggest number you can have is, for weighting, is 20. So I gave power and torque a 20 because it's pretty darn important. Originality, I've gave it a 10 weight, and Tony might give it more than that. But once again, I'm trying to show you the process. The sound, I gave that a 20. That's a must. It's not a must, but it's almost a must. It's a high level want, so we give that a 20. It's got to sound right. Drivability, 10. Because Tony has a 456 gear, he can get away with a little less torque, but I weighted that as a 10. Idle quality is also a 10. Risk, I gave that a 20. If you have a failure, it's catastrophic, guys. And if you have a small, say a lobe or a valve lifter fails, it's got major consequences. So I gave that a 20. And the difficulty of installation, I weighted that as a 15. So let's look at the first Howard's cam. This is a Howard's solid roller cam that Bill suggested. 269, 237, 555 lift, 110 LSA. So, and 49 degrees of overlap. One of the nice things about a roller is you can have less overlap with more lift because of the fact you can lift the valve more quickly. So on the power and torque, I gave that. So the higher the number, the better, obviously. Okay. So perfect would be a 20 and terrible would be 0. So for Bill's cam, I gave that a 20 because I don't think there's any question that the engine will make more power with the solid roller that has 550 thousandths lift. So I gave that a 20. Originality, I gave it a 0 because it's not original, okay? And that might be an important factor. And then the sound, I gave that a 12. It's probably going to sound pretty good, but it probably won't be exactly original. Once again, I'm trying to be as objective as I can. Drivability, it's out of 10 this time, so I gave it a 10 out of 10. The roller cam will probably be the best cam as far as drivability is concerned for reasons I mentioned already. Idle quality and vacuum also, it'll be a 10 as well. Risk of failure, I give it a 20 because there's really not very much risk in installing a roller cam. If you do it right, you just don't get failures. A lifter could fail, but it won't destroy the cam, etc. So I gave that a 20 out of 20. And for difficulty of modifications, I gave it a 0. Once again, 20 is 15 would be perfect and 0 is not, because the fact it's a roller, we got to modify the cylinder heads. The spring pockets won't be big enough. We have to make the swing pockets bigger to use a spring that's capable of holding the roller cam. Shorter push rods, got a way to retain the thrust in the camshaft. So more modifications required and more difficulty of installation. So bills come out, if I multiply or add all these items together, it comes out to 42. So then let's look at the Summit. This is a Summit knockoff cam that's similar, but here I'll show you the difference. It's got the same lift, okay, but you got less advertised duration. So duration of 50 is the same as the original cam, but the less advertised duration means it's going to have faster ramps. And it's also got a 114 LSA and 86 degrees of overlap. So for that reason, for power, I gave it a 12 out of 20. It would probably be the third best in terms of power, okay? So I gave it a 12 out of 20. For originality, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. The sound, I gave it a 15 out of 20. It's not going to be exactly the same because that long overlap in the 302 cam makes a difference. Drivability, I gave it a 7 out of 10. It'll be a little bit better drivable than the original cam. Idle quality, same thing. Risk of failure, out of 20, I gave it a 12 because of the fact that out of 20, so once again, 20 would be better because of the design of the camshaft. And then difficulty of mods required 15 out of 15. It's a flat top cam like the original, goes in exactly the same way, so it gets maximum points. The comp, here's the comp, original solid flat tappet cam. So what's the difference? It's got more duration, more advertised duration, 346 advertised duration. It's So it's got larger or slower ramps, same duration at 50, the same lift as the original cam. So it has, and this overlap number would probably be a good number for a field dragster or something. But because of the soft ramps, it's hard to equate that because that would almost exclude it from being used. But it's the original cam, and that's why these engines idled the way they did. The soft ramps allow it to do that, but it has a lot of overlap, and that's what kills the low end torque. So for power wise, out of the 20, it gets a 10 compared to the other one. So it would actually be the least. It's because it's a replica of the original cam. Originality, it gets 10 out of 10, of course, because it is the original cam. Sound, it'll get a 20 out of 20 because it's going to sound exactly the same because it is the same. Drivability, it gets a 6 out of 10, which is the worst for reasons I mentioned already. Idle quality and vacuum is the same. Risk of failure, it's 15 out of 20. It's a flat tappet cam and it's going to have some failure possibility, but less than some of the other choices. And difficulty of installation, it gets 15 out of 15 because it's a straight up, it's the original style. So the solid lifter cam that Tony picked, it's a dual pattern cam. It's solid flat tappet as well, dual pattern cam. Now it has 247, 254, so actually a little bit duration on the intake. It's a comp cam, so it's going to have faster acceleration on the ramps. The lift is more, 504 or 498, and the LSA is 112, and the overlap 63.5, which is a better number than, as you can see, a couple of the other choices. So it's second best that way. So Tony's cam is a 15 out of 20 for power. So I think the roller is going to make the most power. It'll make the second most power. It's faster ramps and it's got more lift. Originality, it's going to be a 5 out of 10 because it's not original. Sound is 15 out of 20. It'll probably sound pretty close to the original, but not exactly the same. Drivability, I give it an 8 out of 10. Because of the faster ramps and stuff, it'll probably be, and the fact that it is the second best, lowest overlap, because we're getting up to pretty high numbers. That's not a bad overlap for a street car. And so drivability, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Idle quality, also an 8. Risk of failure, 10 out of 20. I give it a 10 because of the faster ramps. There's more risk of a cam failing with the faster ramps. So I give it a 10 out of 20. And then difficulty of installation, it gets 15 again because it's a straight up installation. So if you add all these numbers across now, and it comes out pretty darn close. So the roller gets 42, the Summit cam gets 41 and a half, the original cam gets 46, and the cam that Tony picked gets 43. Now, that's pretty close. And so in the end, there's a process of reconciliation. Even though the numbers tell you a couple percent more, Tony's probably going to want the cam that he picked, and that's not a bad choice. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's some subjectivity in my weighting and scoring, and so I'd be really happy with installing any of these cams, and a lot of the cams that other guys mentioned. So the idea is to show you a process. Every big problem is a bunch of little problems. Every big decision is a bunch of little decisions. I know I don't have the mental capacity to think about all those things at the same time. You might think of some of them and pick the thing that you like the most. And then when you get it installed, you realize, oh, I didn't think about drivability, or I didn't think about vacuum, or I didn't think of one of those things. If you score all and weight them all, at least you'll make sure that your thinking process forces you to think through that. We use this in industry to make multiple $1-million decisions. And usually by committee with a bunch of guys sitting around who have knowledge and information and can be objective about scoring. So hope you found that process interesting. We will follow up more with Tony's engine. We were looking for these bolts. We had lots of suggestion These are the windage tray bolts. I'm just going to grab his windage tray that Tony has. So these are the windage tray bolts, and I went to install them. They were too long. So I actually took a suggestion and shortened them, and I had to extend the thread. Interesting exercise. When I did extend the thread, and I went to torque these bolts, they weren't torquing up nice. And I actually took one of them and put it on, just use an old main bearing cap. This is not one of Tony's engine. This is a main bearing cap in my vise, and torqued it up, and they permanently elongated. If you watch my video on fasteners, they permanently elongated. What the heck happened? Here's what happened. You look at a close-up. When you extend the threads, the section of the bolt, you can see the reduced area, reduced cross-section of the bolt here. The purpose of that is to make sure that the bolt stretches in this area and not in the threads. So when I extended the threads, it forced the threads up into the reduced area, and that weakened the bolt. So in the exercise that I did, I torqued it up to 80 foot-pounds. It took 80 foot-pounds, it didn't break. In fact, I even tried one at 85 foot-pounds, but it stretched at 25 thousandths of an inch. And when I took the bolt back out, it had permanently stretched 10 thousandths of an inch. So essentially, this is like a torque to yield, not intentionally. I can't use these bolts. I'm not going to use them. Tony found an ARP stud kit that's made for installing this windage tray, and that's on order, and that's what we will use to install Tony's windage tray. So we're going to change out 5 bolts in the block to ARP studs, and they will accommodate the windage tray. So hope you found all that interesting. More in the process with Tony's engine. This is not the final decision. I haven't even consulted the other guys. I just want to show the process. And maybe it didn't even give us the right result that we wanted, but it forced us to look at it objectively. So tip of the day, here's my latest project. I just bought this 4-bolt main block. It's an 010 block, 4-bolt main block. This was a truck block. I looked at the code, and if it starts with a T, it's a truck block. And it is a version block. It's never been apart before. The crankshaft's never been turned before. The bore's never been bored. I measured it up. This block is in amazingly good condition. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I haven't decided. I just got it. But for the tip of the day, I wanted to show something. One of the things that we often do, or always do pretty much on an engine rebuild, these thrill oil galley holes come with a pressed-in plug originally, and we replace them with a pipe plug. Like, okay, let's show the example. There's Tony's engine. I've already installed the pipe plug. We drill and tap. That's a 1/4 inch pipe tap. And we drill and tap and put pipe plugs in there. They're just less likely to pop out or leak, or they're just absolutely unlikely. They will not pop out or ever leak. But here's one thing you have to watch if you want to do this. If you look closely in the block, here's where you have to drill and tap your hole. And you can see the little oil hole in the bottom, because on the other side, the oil galley feeds oil all the way up the engine. This is how your camshaft and your main bearings get fed oil. There's a little hole there. So the oil comes up through that galley, all the way through the engine, and then down, and there's an annular groove here, and they go around that groove, and the oil goes back out into the main bearing from here. So when you put your cam bearing in, there's just a whole little hole in the cam bearing to allow that oil to get to the cam. But mainly what it's doing, so this is not priority oiling. Priority oiling means your crankshaft gets the oil first. In this case, the camshaft gets the oil first. But it doesn't really matter. It all gets there. But we've seen this happen before. People with good intention drill and tap this hole too deep. And I'll light this one out. Drill and tap this hole too deep. And what happens is when you install the plug, pipe plug, it goes in too deep, and it can block that hole off. If it does, you've now stopped oil from getting not only to your camshaft, stopped oil from getting to your front main bearing, and you're going to have a failure. So If you decide to do that, be very careful. Tap it a little bit at a time, and try your plug in a little bit at a time until you just get it flush. As long as it's flush like this one, I've measured it before, you're good to go. But if that plug goes in there deeper, it could give you a problem. So long video. Hope you enjoy the information. Please like and subscribe. We're just getting close to 15,000 subscribers. Subscribers are what makes it worth making videos. I love making videos. I enjoy sharing knowledge and information. When we're making videos, we're not building engines, and it takes time, it costs money. So we need to have subscribers. We like likes. If you give me a like, YouTube might show it to somebody else that might subscribe. So please help me out with that. You keep subscribing and liking my videos, I'll keep making more. Thank you for watching Cold Scratch.